This is a video to talk about how to add 2 lines to a graph. And so let's just take a situation of I have a ball, I drop it from a certain height, and it bounces up to a certain height. So this will be drop height in centimeters, and then bounce height. And since I'm going to have 2 different balls here, so ball 1, bounce height in centimeters, and then ball 2, bounce height also in centimeters. Now there's a big overlap here. They are centered because something I did previous on this, it would naturally come out like that. However, there's still overlap and we need to clear that up, just make it easier to read. I could make the print smaller, or I could just highlight and double click on the boundary between the 2 cells, and now the cell width has been adjusted to match the length of what the contents. So various drop heights here, 10. There's my set of data. I want to center it, just to make it a little bit easier to read, and now we're ready to do a graph. What depends on what? Well, how high a ball bounces depends upon the height from which something was dropped. So the bounce height depends upon the drop height. So in terms of a graph, it would be bounce height versus drop height. That is what we're plotting here. Now, ordinarily, I would not type it into the spreadsheet, but this is just to sort of illustrate from that title how we know what to plot. In the lab procedure, it will explicitly say plot bounce height versus drop height. I think there's 1 lab, maybe 2 labs at the advanced levels where I'm expecting you to be able to figure it out. Might have changed that at this point. So bounce height versus drop height tells us that since bounce depends upon drop, bounce height will be my dependent, drop height will be independent, and that is the proper order. It's always dependent versus independent variables, and the dependent variable is always vertical. The drop height is the independent variable is always horizontal. So we need to, one thing I could do is I could just highlight this, and let's create the chart. Now we need to make sure that this is right. So first off, we want to go to, there we go. I need to click on the chart and then go to quick layouts, pick one upper left, and this gives me a place to actually put things. So the chart title, bounce height versus drop height. This axis right here, this is the dependent, so bounce height, space, parenthesis, the units, close parenthesis. Notice that in the title here, bounce height comes first. Bounce height is closer to the vertical axis. The vertical axis is bounce height. That should always be the case. Down here, axis title. This is drop height, space, centimeters, parentheses. Now let's make sure that the data actually matches, that the drop height goes up to 80 and this goes up to 80. So this is proper and that's proper. If not, we need to go in and switch that around. We have the 2 sets of data automatically. And so I can right click here. And so if I needed to switch the data around, I can just do that, make sure that's highlighted, click edit, and now I can go in and change if this column A and column B need to be switched around, then I can just highlight the A, make it a B, highlight the B, make it an A, and that'll do it. Or I could clear that space and just highlight what this needs to be. The X value is drop height, so I could just do that. And also just a quick check here, notice that this goes from the second row to second row, ninth row. If those are misaligned, it can really cause issues. Just be careful about that. Also, if I wanted to select that, I could just start from a blank slate here, click on this. This gives me just that one single row. I highlight it, and then sends me back. Now I need to add trend line. So right click, add trend line. Right click on this one, just right clicking on any of the data points there, add trend line. I do need some information, so starting with this one right over here, I go to linear. Now, if this does not appear, so let's say this is not there, I can double click on the trend line, and this will magically appear. So I want to make sure it's linear, and then I want to display equation on chart and display R squared value. I'm going to move it slightly in order to make it a little bit more visible. For R2, I just click on that one since the right panel was already up, or I could have double clicked. Check it's linear, display equation, display R squared value. And there it goes. Similar to the previous video, if I want to change the number of significant figures, I'd click on the box. Actually, let's see if I'm in the box what happens. Come over here, category, number, and it does change all of it. So I actually don't have to click on the box. I can click inside, and I can make that 4. And it goes to 4 decimal places. That's not 4 significant figures. In this case, it happens to be, but it's not automatically. Now my slope is 0.5923 in units of centimeters per centimeter. This negative 0.1867, that is my vertical intercept. In math class, they call it the y-intercept, but is this really the y value? No, it's bounce height. Now, it does say y here. If you're using OpenOffice spreadsheet, which is the superior tool, then it would say f of x, which basically means the same thing. That just means a function of x. R squared value is the goodness of fit, so 0.994, pretty darn good fit there. And this one, not quite as good a fit, but still pretty darn good. And that's what happens when you make up data. So 0.3506, 0.3852, 0.3506 is the slope, negative 0.3852 is the intercept, the vertical intercept. When you're in questions where I say, what is the slope? X is not part of the slope. Now, properly, this would be, we'd have to define y as the bounce height and x as the drop height. I let this one go if you can leave it as y and x, or f of x and x. And there's the graph there. Now let's clean up. We do need a legend, since I do have 2 different plots here, unlike for the single graph where I don't need a legend. But here, if I want to get rid of this, I just click on it. First I get into the legend, then I click on that specifically, I hit delete, and then I do the same thing here. And that is sufficient. Now, if you were printing in black and white, then color coding becomes an issue. You need to make sure that I click on the data point. So if I click there, it's hitting the data point. I click there, too close to the line. I want to click on a data point, but not on the line. And so now, built in, and make it triangles. And so this way, if you're dealing with black and white, you're good. Now there's no overlap here between the lines, at least the part that is plotted, and so there's not any confusion. Sometimes you have 2 sets of data which are so close to each other, it's really difficult to know which line goes with which set of data, and you need to be careful about that. In the only lab where that potentially is an issue, if you have 2 lines that are really close to each other, you didn't follow instructions because you picked 2 balls that were too similar. Also notice that this equation right here, I am assuming goes with the closer line right here, and this equation goes with the closer trend line. And there we go.